to it. Okay, for the people that are on the Torah anytime, we have to share with you something. And this is how much we care about our community that listens to the classes outside of this class. We started the class already. I don't know how long it was. Let's just say that it was a while, or it doesn't matter. And we realized that the audio, the mic was not on. So for the courtesy of the people in the online world, they, we'll do a quick recap for them. So again, we're continuing with part 3. This is the final part of the topic of possessions, Dybukim. Unbelievable. All right. So the first, again, we're dealing with stories from the Minchat Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda Fataya. The first part of the first story is that there was a woman by the name of Ka'atun, and she came to Rabbi Yehuda Fataya. She was a daughter of Jonah, and she said that her heart started stinging her, and she had these terrible convulsion-like symptoms, that she would roll on the floor, but roll on the floor for a very far distance, that she could not be held down unless she could not be stopped unless she was held down and pinned down by people to actually physically and forcefully push her and prevent her from rolling down. The reason why she came now is because now she was pregnant. And now that she was pregnant, she was nervous about losing the baby from all these violent rolling down on the floor. So she went to see the rabbi saying, what's going on? Why is this happening to me? Besides that, she also had a recurring dream where she dreamt that this man is trying to be with her intimately. So she decided she was going to go and speak to the rabbi. The rabbi went, he looked into her, and he checked her, and he saw that indeed that she did have a spirit. So the rabbi was trying to converse with the spirit, and just like we did, in the previous classes, you notice this is a very common ground that whenever the rabbi converses with the spirit, there's actually a lot of back and forth on, hey, what's going on? Why did you? What the sins that you did? What were the issues that happened? So the rabbi started speaking about this spirit. The kicker, the twist of this spirit is that this spirit was none other than her own brother. Her own brother went and possessed her. So what happened with this story? The year was 1914, and there was a war that broke out, and the Turks were drafting into the army all the young, able-bodied people to go into the army. This particular boy, he was a young man, but he was extremely handsome. So they drafted him, but they didn't draft him. They didn't put him in the front lines. They figured they could use him for other types of services. So he didn't get drafted. And so I should point out over here, there are many people that they think that in life you get further if, let's say, you look a certain way, then you get, that you'll get further, you'll get better business. And sometimes it's even true when you look at it, the world the way it looks. Because you look at it, there are certain businesses, especially marketing, bringing in business, that you have to be presentful in a certain way in order to bring in the business. And they'll only hire people that look a certain way, and they're not going to hire if there's somebody who is 500 pounds and he smells very, very lovely of like a very strong BO, and he's gonna be like, yeah, I want to sell your product. I don't know how many people are going to hire him. They want something so you think that people that are put together will get further in life. Sometimes you think that somebody who's smart, who is charming, a good talker will get better in life. I have seen numerous times, and I love when I see these types of cases, because it just shows and proves how God runs the world. That you see people, easiest example is to deal in business. You see somebody who runs a multi-million-dollar business, but you don't understand how he even would be able to hold a minimum wage job. Like, it doesn't speak a word of English, doesn't know how to write, doesn't know how to do almost anything, and yet he has the ability to run a multi-million-dollar business. Now, why and how does that work? So the one aspect of it is that you realize that all these things mean nothing. Everything is 100% from heaven. Everything is 100% from God. How are you going to be successful? Granted, we have to do our hishtadlut. We have to do our, the things that we have to do, go out, get work, go out and try to find, a match. We need to do our what's a word I'm looking for? Hishtadlut. Due diligence. Yeah. So that we have to do that. But at the end of the day, everything is from God. So this man, he goes and he gets drafted from 1914. By the year 1916, he decides on himself that he's going to go into the war because he wants to fight. That reminds me, I had a student once that he decided by reasons I cannot understand that he wants to go fight ISIS. Now, he actually went and he fought ISIS. And he couldn't go, like, not like, hey, I'm fighting ISIS from my computer, like, ISIS, I hate you. You know, like, he actually went down, and he had to, like, go from, like, country to country to, like, join some Arab, I don't know, village with, like, you know, with arm, yeah. So, and he went to, and he joined, and he actually fought against ISIS. Like, you know, I saw some of the pictures, you know, and then he got injured, and then he came back. And I'm like, you know, when I told him when he left, I'm like, I don't understand why you're going. I'm like, you have an urge to fight? Go to the Israeli army. You know what? Go to the American army. You got to go fight Arabs against Arabs. That's like your life goal, long mission. Anyways, I couldn't convince him. He went. Baruch Hashem, he came back alive. I think now he's in California somewhere. But I guess he had this you know, fighting fever. This man also did. He decided that even though he didn't need to get drafted, he went on his own fruition to go into the war. What happened was one time he was working on an airplane, and the door of the airplane closed. Now, the door of an airplane, especially in the early 1900s, are not made of carbon, you know, fiber or whatever, you know, these like light little things that, you know, like these doors. If a door closes on you, then there's part of you that is outside of the door, and there's part of you that's inside of the door. And that's what happened to him. He was working on it, his foot got stuck outside, the door closed, his foot stayed outside, and he stayed on the inside. And from the sheer amount of pain, he was rolling back and forth nonstop while, you know, in the immense pain that he was. Then, unfortunately, they weren't able to save him. The foot became very infested, and he got an infection, and he ended up passing away a short while after that. But because even though he was a young man, he was full of sins. Like, he lived a very, very long life. He, as we said before, he was very handsome, and the army officers took him for other, reasons. So the officers actually paid him for his services. The men officers paid him for certain services, and the woman, which means the wives of these officers, also took him for certain services. And not only that, there were women of ill repute that this was their business. What he was doing, well, he was also, I guess, in the same business. I think you guys understand what we're talking about, right? Okay, so he was in, these women, they would also ask him to do, certain things, and even regarding whether they're menstruating, whether they're not, in all aspects, they did. So, long story short, he came up to heaven with a long slew of sins that he had to deal with, and he didn't do teshuvah on it. So right after he died, he became a spirit, and he wasn't able to go not to heaven, not to hell. He was in the kafakela stage. And then he entered his sister he possessed his own sister, which is the story that we're dealing with right now. And since he was so accustomed to doing these immoral acts in his lifetime, that he couldn't help himself, that's what he was doing to his sister, and that was the dreams that she was having. Now, the mother and the sister were listening to this spirit that was possessed inside the sister talk about their own brother and son, and they were like, can't be. Our son, our brother, he's still alive. He just, we're just waiting for him to write to us any day. So the mother says, if you are indeed my son, give me a proof that you are indeed him and you're not just making this all up. So the spirit answered, it says, when we were young, we would sleep in a certain room, and you would sleep, it goes to his mother, you would sleep on one side, dad would sleep on another side, and you would sing me a certain song. And one night, I wasn't able to fall asleep. And then this particular sister that I'm, possessing, she took me on the side, she told me a story, and I fell asleep that way. And they verified that the words are true. So the rabbi goes and he tells the spirit, and he says, how do you look? Like, what's your appearance? And he said that his whole body is filled with long hair like a goat. And that's a sign that it was full of sin, that it has to be clean, the body, after they pass away. So what the rabbi started doing, he started doing the tikkunim. He started doing the unifications on the spirit. And for 2 long years, he's been doing the unifications on this spirit. And the year was 1921. And every time that he would rid him of the hair, that he would get cleansed from the unifications, this spirit would then go either lie with his sister, lie with an animal, and just bring all the impurities right back on him. And he wouldn't be able to do anything. It was sort of like this mean cycle that he got clean and then he got dirty again. He got clean and he got dirty again. So the rabbi goes and he says, up to a certain point, he says, I want to speak to your question?
Yeah, I'm just really confused. The brother is in his sister's body and he's doing sin, so he's not getting anywhere?
So, yes.
He's trying to get out?
Yeah.
He's trying to get out, or she wants him out?
No, so okay, so it is complicated, and there's even a lot more questions that you can ask on this, because how could he do sins? How does he have free will? Which is something we spoke about last class. So no, he's doing it.
Her, so is she?
He's doing these impure acts, which prevents it. No. It's through the, it's like when in dreams, but he's actually doing it in the spiritual realm.
But she sees it.
At times, yes. Okay.
Physically doing anything?
No, well that I don't know. Actually, it doesn't. Yeah, it's like a dreaming. Yeah, that's usually in a dreaming stage. But in his aspect, it's actually doing it. So when spirits go and possess a body, it's not really they're trying to get out. The reason why they possess is because it gives them an escape to prevent them from, dealing with the damaging angels that are.
Yeah, but why would you go and keep doing?
That's a good question. That was the question I thought you were going to ask. So the question, which was probably the next one that you were going to ask. So yeah, the reason for that is that I'll give you an example like this so you can understand it. You have a person that is a very, very angry person. And you say, like, I want you to work on this. I want you to work on this anger. You need to work on it. And be like, okay, fine. And no matter how much they try to work on it, it still comes back because it's so much ingrained in them that it's difficult to break that habit. There's some people, a good example is a drug addict. A drug addict, like, he can try or she can try to break away from it, but after a certain point, either they're going to relapse or if they don't try hard enough. So it's sort of it's like sort of out of their control in a certain sense. So to this, when you go into the next world, it's not like you'll be like, okay, I understand that was bad, let's fix it. You ingrained in yourself a personality, and that's how you are. So why these things happen, it's a long thing. Maybe if we have time afterwards, we'll go a little bit more into detail to explain it. But for now, let's move forward. So the rabbi goes to the spirit and says, I want to speak to the officer in charge of you. What's his name? So the spirit says his name is Joseph. So he says, please, let him come in, and because the only way that the rabbi could speak to it is only if it goes through this person who's being possessed. So the rabbi says, I want to speak to this officer. So the woman, like, sort of, you could see, like, she lost, like, consciousness per se for a minute, and then she got back up, and the rabbi says, who am I speaking to? So he says, I am Joseph, the officer. So the officer says, he says, I don't understand how, it has never happened before that a rabbi could speak to the officer. You don't have anything to do with me. You could speak with the spirit, but you have nothing to do with me. So the rabbi goes back to him and says, what if I get permission from the heavenly court? Would you speak to me? He says, if you're able to do that, then fine. So the rabbi went and he said a short prayer. The prayer was as follows. He says, Master of the world, may it be your will to grant Officer Joseph permission to talk to me. And then the officer says, okay, in a whisper. So, and the officer goes on and says, forgive me, your honor, I didn't know this before, but I'm prepared to answer all your questions. So the rabbi says, you are granted permission to speak to me. And he said, yes, they told me to hold nothing back from him. So now the rabbi started asking questions about this damaging spirit. Damaging officer. So he goes and we're gonna not gonna ask and say the questions. We're just gonna say the answers, and you'll figure out the questions. The officer says we do not sleep at all, not day or night. We stand upright constantly. He says because we don't have any knees, and our feet are similar to those of a donkey. We also never become tired from standing. They eat 2 meals a day. And there's something very interesting. The meal just appears at chest level for them. It's sort of like a handful of red lentil-like substance. They eat the entire thing, and the entire time it's suspended in the air. After they finish eating, the whole thing gets disappeared. They don't know where it comes from, how it came there. They don't know anything like that. And then, once it disappears, they don't eat anything until the night. There's no like midnight snack. That's all they eat, and that's what sustains them for the entire time. And the spirit, the mazakim, this damaging demon, I guess you could call him, told the rabbi. He said that the spirits, they don't eat anything. The only thing that sustains them is the ear. So we see over here, just to pause for a second, there is still a little bit of physicality in this world. Because you notice they are still in this world. They're in the limbo stage, so it's still part of the physical aspects. There's still some physical aspects to it. Then they say when they have to beat the spirit, when they have to torture the spirit, there's this sort of rod that materializes in their hand, and the hand starts beating them involuntary. The amount of strength, how many times, everything does it involuntary. As soon as it's finished, the rod disappears, and then they go back to whatever they were doing beforehand. So the rabbi goes to this damaging officer Joseph, and he says, I want to see you. Reveal yourself to me. So he says, impossible. The officer says, I'm afraid that you'll be scared. So the rabbi replied back, says, don't worry about this. I'm used to seeing such things. So this damaging spirit says, I'm ashamed and embarrassed to reveal myself. He says, because our face looks nothing like humans. So he says, in that case, please describe to me your face. And he says that their faces are next to their shoulder. It seems like maybe they don't have any neck. And they have a very, very long nose, and it's very crooked, and it reaches to the chest. Then the rabbi says, what? You said you know some people like that? So anyways, I said this class to the men, and they were like, so you mean like a regular Jew? So I said, no, this said nothing about holding bags of money. But no, because that's how did the Gentile world portray Jews? Crooked nose with bags of money, just walking around.
And horns.
And horns sometimes also, yeah, that's true. But in any case, the spirits look nothing like the human race. So the rabbi goes and says, okay, I had enough over here. I want to speak to the spirit. So the spirit comes back and he goes to the spirit and he says, I want to send you on a mission. I want you to send you to the heavenly court. I have some questions. I want you. So he was sending some questions to the heavenly court through the spirit. So the spirit says, I'm so scared. Are you kidding me? How am I supposed to get up there? They're never going to let me go there. And they're going to punish me for going there. He says, no, don't worry about it. You're going on my behalf. And he says, you go and you ask permission if you can go. And the rabbi gave him the questions. He went up there and he says, I have some questions that I'm asking on behalf of a rabbi from the world. And he said, and they gave him permission to come in. So now this is what the questions that he asked, and this is the answer that they gave him. So the first question that he asked was, the rabbi asked the spirit to ask the heavenly court that generally when you're in this kafakela stage, this in limbo stage, you're there for a certain amount of years. So the rabbi wanted to know, by him doing these unifications, these tikkunim, what happens is that he shortens the amount of time that they have to stay in the stage. So the question is, does the court approve of that? Are they okay with me shortening his sentence by doing all this tikkunim, because then his full sentence does not need to be kept? So the court answered, it says, we don't care. Like, what do we care? We want the person to be clean. However he gets clean, by all means necessary, who cares? As long as the end goal is reached, we're fine with it. To understand this is, there's a very, very famous question that is asked again and again. That the question is as follows: God knows the future, right? Right. So God knows that this person who's a very, very big sinner, he knows that he's going to sin, right? Right. He knew the future. He knew that this person was going to sin. He still created him knowing that he's going to sin. So now the question is, why is this whole person held responsible? You created him knowing that it should be, that he's going to sin. So the answer is the question is a good question, but it's not a good question at all at the same point in time. When you look at an example that Rabbi Yehuda Fatali gives, it says, let's say somebody goes and buys a very expensive suit. He buys all right, let's say someone buys a very expensive dress. I have to realize who I'm speaking to over here. A custom-made, I'm going to embarrass myself, what's that thing with an H? I know it's an expensive company. Hermes, yes. So let's say they go and they get a very expensive Hermes, whatever it is, the most expensive over there. And then they're walking out, and then it gets dirty. So then someone goes over to them and be like, why did you spend $10,000 on a bag, which should be a question regardless. But let's say they spent $10,000 or whatever it is, $20,000 on a bag if it's going to get dirty, and they'll respond to be like, what? I don't understand. What's the difference? I says, it's going to get dirty. I'll wash it and then I'll continue using it. Who cares if it got dirty? And that's the same thing. When we come into this world, God knew that we were going to sin. But why did He create us if we're going to do bad? And the answer is, even though we're doing bad, He says we're just getting dirty. All we have to do is get cleansed. Once we get cleansed, now we're dealing with all the good that we accomplished. So, when you look at it in that aspect, think of it as this in limbo stage, this terrible time, this terrible stage where people get tortured, and for all the sins. By the way, these are sins that only if they did not do teshuvah. If they did teshuvah, they don't get to deal with this. They're clean. So these are situations where they didn't do teshuvah, and they come into this terrible stage, and they have to go through hell and Gehinnom, and who knows how much suffering that they have to go through in life. Be like, why? Be like, you don't understand. This is just the dry cleaning process. This is like, it's as if saying, like, why buy a expensive dress if it's just going to get dirty? It says you wash it and then you can wear it again. It's not the question is really not a question. So and that's why they told him in court that says that the end goal is that this person should get cleansed. This is the method that he needs to get cleansed, and this is in the limbo stage, and it's unfortunately through a tremendous amount of suffering. But if it can be achieved in a different way, Chazak let it, let it deal with it that way. So now, the second question that he asked them was, if a spirit goes and enters a person and pains him on Shabbat, can the rabbi go and do unifications, tikkunim on him on Shabbat? And they respond to him that if he's in pain, he is permissible to do these tikkunim. Meanwhile, the rabbi continues to do unifications on this spirit, and it's that vicious cycle. Every time that he tries to do something, it goes back, and nothing is working. Until it came to the point, the rabbi's like, you know what? We're going to do like I don't know, what is it called? Like when you do like a crash course, where he's like going to go like non-stop, like again and again, unifications after unifications to try to like break everything possible. So they went and he did like 50 unifications, like one after another, until finally the spirit was so exhausted, so much in pain, and he was like, enough! I'm going to tell my dad on you. It's like, I'm going to tell my father on you. And so he goes and he leaves for 15 minutes. And he goes, his father passed away. And he goes, tells his father. He goes to his father's grave and he says, you know what they're doing to me over here? And the father starts talking to him. And he says, because the father didn't even know that he passed away. The father was also in this state. And he says, and he started, going back and forth in his grave, screaming and crying for his son that he passed away so young. And the father goes to the son and says, I have been dead for 15 years, and yet you are more rectified than I am. So the rabbi, because this is the spirit came back and was telling the rabbi when he spoke to his father. So the rabbi asked the spirit, did you see your father? Did you see how he looks? So he says, no, I wasn't able to see how he looks. So the rabbi went over to the sister, who was, this I guess, medium, if you could call her right now, through method of communication. And he goes, would you agree that if your father comes into you and I'll do unifications on your father to sort of help him out? And she agreed. She says, my father, and yeah, any means that I could help him, I will, do it. So the rabbi goes to the spirit and says, I want you to call your father over here. The father comes in, and he starts speaking to the father. And the father says, the rabbi first says, like, who am I speaking to? And he says, I'm Jonah. And the rabbi says, I would like to, effect tikkunim. I want to effect unifications on you to cleanse you. And he says, but I have two conditions. Number one is that the second that I stop, you must immediately leave your daughter, not cause her any harm, pain, or anything whatsoever. No hiding inside of her, no staying over there. Just go straight out without any problems. And number two, when I'm ready to perform unifications with you, I'll call your name Jonah, and you have to be immediately ready. So the spirit, which is the father, which was Jonah, he says, even if you wouldn't have told me that, I would have thought, this is my daughter. You think I'm interested in harming her? He says, I'm not immature like my son, Judah. He says, by all means, I'll do anything that you ask. And then the spirit says, and he says, are you not, Yehuda, the son of Moshe Fatiah? And he says, I am. And then the spirit starts saying, may God reward you for all your efforts and for your great and invaluable kindness that you're doing. So the rabbi replied to him, it's really your kindness that you're doing to me. So the spirit was surprised. I'm like, what? It's like, you're doing me the kindness. You're doing the unifications on me. So the rabbi responds to him and says, I'll tell you a mashal, a parable. When a woman gives birth and she goes and she feeds the baby, she breastfeeds the baby, so it's very beneficial for the baby to get that type of nutrition. However, it's also beneficial for the mother, because if the mother doesn't feed the baby, then it's very painful for her. If she doesn't empty the milk out, it could get very hard, and then sometimes you need surgery, sometimes you need, different things. So even though it's beneficial for the baby, it's also beneficial for the mother. So the rabbi says, so too for me. He says, I spend so much time and effort and prayers to try to understand the secrets of this in the Torah of these aspects of the spirits and everything over here. And it says, I need people, I need customers to be able to do this to be able to help. Otherwise, all this would be for vain. So she goes and by the way, this is how you tell the difference between, look at it, this is a rabbi. All right, yeah. Let me give you an example of this. Have you ever came to a doctor and the doctor would be like, thank you so much for coming. No, I don't want money. Forget about the insurance. I just spent so many years in college studying for this, and I'm just so happy that I can help people. Granted, yeah, some of them, they go in for the good, but since they're trying to figure out how to bill the insurance for things that don't even exist in your body, and be like, I fixed, I changed the valves of the unicorn, and the insurance company's like, they keep on trying to do that. Here you see what a true rabbi is. He says, not only is he spending his time, effort, and everything that he has to help these spirits, but he also thanks them for them. He says, I appreciate it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to help. So anyways, the rabbi goes over to Jonah, the spirit, and he says, listen, he says, I want you to tell me everything And don't leave anything out. I need to know all the details. What was the sin that you did? How long? Give me all the details and information of what you're doing and where you are. So the spirit goes and says that he's been for 15 years. He passed away, and the sin that he did, which he had one sin. He had one sin in his life that I guess of this caliber maybe that he is still paying for. And he said when he was alive, he was an agent for merchants, and he sold the silk. So he was like this middleman, and he would sometimes have to go to the buyers of these merchants and get the product or pay them. It was one time that there was an urgent deal, and he was called into one of the house. He had to go into visit one of the houses of one of his merchants that he does business with. And when he gets to the house, the wife says, my husband's not home. But come in, I'll send one of the servants to go run and get him. So the man comes in, and she sends the servants to go get him. And meanwhile, right now in the house, it was just them two. So she went, this married woman literally went to this person's shoes and started kissing his feet, and says, please be intimate with me. And then she took out money, gave him money, and the spirit says, I was overcome with tremendous temptation that I fulfilled her request. And he says that he's now spent 15 years in this situation because of that. And the rabbi asked him, how long do you have left over for what's your term? And he says, I don't know, they didn't tell me. So the rabbi says it could be the reason why they didn't give him the term yet is because what happens is when a woman commits adultery on her husband, then she is forbidden to be with her husband. Now, every time that her husband is with her, that's a sin. So who gets part of that sin? The guy who was part of committed adultery. So now this is a very complex topic. I don't think I'm going to speak about it because there's many. So let's say someone does teshuvah on it. How does that work? Do you have to tell the husband? There is so many details to this that one has to speak to, because you understand the severity of it. Because if somebody, let's say, goes, and I've gotten this question before, very unfortunate, more than once, unfortunately, that somebody unfortunately committed the worst sin, one of these sins, and then he wants to know, does he now have to tell the husband? Let's say they're still married. Does he have the obligation to go tell the husband to do that? Now, because why? Because every time it's a sin. So now he doesn't, he wants to do teshuvah, but at the same point in time, there's a lot of different aspects that go into this. I do not want to get into it. All I can say is speak to your local Orthodox rabbi. He might not want to get into it as well, and then you say, who can I speak to? And you keep on going up the ladder until you find someone to speak to it, because this has to be dealt with, and it will be dealt with appropriately. You don't have to think there's ways out, there's ways to do these things that is not going to ruin your entire life. So it's definitely very appropriate to speak to a local Orthodox rabbi regarding these types of situations. But in this particular case, he did not say anything. He did not say anything to the husband, and he didn't even do teshuvah. He didn't do teshuvah. And the rabbi asked him, says, so how come you didn't do teshuvah? You knew that, the severity of the sin. And he says, to be honest, I was too embarrassed. Who am I going to go tell a rabbi about this? This such an embarrassing sin. So he didn't do any teshuvah, and then he had to, then he passed away. Which is also something I do need to point out, that no matter what sin someone committed, now, generally speaking, the regular teshuvah process should be followed for every sin. Now there are, which by the way is, you have to regret what you did, you have to confess it to God, and you also have to make sure you never do it again. You stop doing this sin. So when a person goes and does serious sins like this, there is more than that. There are repercussions that come into effect, and they do need to speak to a rabbi saying, what am I supposed to do? Besides the fact that there are tikkunim for it. There is something called, this is on a very high level, and this is something that, it's only if someone is on a high level of, fasting. And there's different things of it, maybe we'll speak about it later, that, that has to be dealt with a very qualified rabbi in this aspect. So, in any case, the person died, didn't do any teshuvah, and he's in this situation. So the rabbi started doing unifications. He started doing tikkunim for him. And as the rabbi was doing tikkunim with him, he kept on calling him, he kept on coming back. It was a few sessions that he did with him, and suddenly the spirit told him, he says, they told me that I have 6 years left on my term. All of a sudden they gave him a number after these tikkunim. And eventually, as the tikkunim kept on coming, the time frame kept on going lower and lower down. And it was significant, from one time for 6 years to 1 year. And then from 1 year up to a certain point in time where they told him, that's it, you're finished, you're ready to go to hell. And which is something also that we do have to mention. When you do teshuvah over here, look at the difference, because he did tikkunim, unifications. And by the way, he was very lucky, the small chance that he had, that he met with a rabbi, that he was able to do it, a very, very small chance. So that things that he would have had to spend 6 years with, a few sessions with the rabbi, with the unifications, it brought it down to nothing. It took everything away. So just to think about it, when we are in this world and we do something bad, don't, do teshuvah. Do teshuvah. That the whole purpose of bringing this series down is for that, to realize that if you don't do teshuvah over here, you're going to have to pay for it in the next world. You don't want to pay for it in the next world. You want to pay for it right here. Why? Because, and by pay for it, I mean just do teshuvah on it. Just repent on it. When you repent, it takes it away. It just cleanses it. It's finished. Why deal with all the suffering? There are many people that they do bad in their life and they just sort of like forget about it. They just put it back and they're like, okay, I'm not going to deal with that. It's my past. I shouldn't deal with that. I'm a new person now. And granted, that's a good method. But you still have to, clean the past. You have to figure it out and you have to move forward. And the teshuvah process is very, very imperative and very, very important. So the rabbi goes and he says, fine, there was a last session until they were decided that they were going to go to, they were going to separate, he was going to go to hell, he was going to go to Gehenna. The next Friday, the rabbi, does a prayer before Shabbat, it was like a few hours before Shabbat, and he says, or short prayer, and he says like this, says, may it be your will, O God, to send Jonah to me that I may rectify him. This is after he already entered hell. And suddenly Jonah appeared. So this is already after he's already in Gehenna, he's in hell. So the rabbi goes over to him and he says, did you enter Gehenna? Did you enter hell? And Jonah replied, yes, I did. And he said, can you describe to me what was going on? And the spirit said, Jonah said that it was an ocean of fire, it was a sea of fire, that it was so hot that even the angels couldn't go in. They had to actually catapult us into the fire. So the rabbi says, so how did you get out? He says there was a big wind that comes, and it took out the people that need to go out, and it sort of washes them up on shore. And what he says, when I came out over there, he says, there was an angel that came over to me, and he says, you've been summoned up in court. And he said, the spirit says, I was trembling like a woman in labor. So I was so nervous of what I had to deal with now in court, that when I came to court, they told me, he says, who do you know in this world? So he says, I know Rabbi Yehuda, Fataya. So he says, he's calling you. He says, go down. So he says, and here I am. And so the rabbi asked him, he says, how far is the distance from hell to the court, from court to here? Like, what's the distance that you had to travel? So he says the distance in each of those are 40 years each. So 40 years from hell to the court, 40 years from the court to here. That was 40 years. And the rabbi was so impressed with this. Says he said that one line. That's the reason why I told you his prayer. His prayer was one line. They condensed all that within that one line to get him to where he was for the prayer. I think prayers don't work, right? So the rabbi goes and asks him, and he says, which is worse? Kafakela, this in limbo stage, or is it or hell? So he says it's different. It depends. He says in Kafakela is worse than hell, but it doesn't go for 24 hours a day. You have some sort of respite. In hell, however, it's nonstop. It's around the clock, so you don't have any rest at all. The rabbi then goes and does some tikkunim on him, even though while he's in hell, and this was also able to shorten his sentence in hell as well. And then he stopped dealing with Jonah. He went back to the son Judah, and he said, and he was trying to deal with the son, and the son was still the same cycle. Every time he tried to do tikkunim, he kept on messing up, and he kept on getting worse until the rabbi said that it's not going to happen. So the rabbi started praying. He says that if this particular soul is composed of two sparks, then let us separate those two sparks, and the good let it be reincarnated, and the bad will deal with it the way that it's being dealt with right now. And a short while later, the rabbi came to a brit, and he noticed that the baby was actually the good spark from this man who was the spirit. And he said that later the baby came with some sort of disease, that he was blinded by one eye and he barely could see in another eye, and he had a scar also. So this way, he's no way going to be able to fall and stumble in the sin of homosexuality or adultery that he fell to in his previous life. Now, let's do one more quick story, and then we'll wrap it up with questions and some ideas that we have to really discuss on it. So that was the end of the story of that one. The following story is also brought from the Minchat Yehuda, and the year was 1911. That a spirit entered a young man by the name of Ephraim, and the parents brought him to this Muslim, heebie-jeebie guy. I really don't know the terminology. I really probably should have, because I've been saying this series for like not the imam, like someone who is focused on the mystical. I guess like a Kabbalist, lahavdil, in their aspect of it. So he goes and this Muslim person tried to exorcise it, and the guy was like, he's like, you know what, if you really want to deal with it, bring me to this rabbi. The spirit says, bring me to Rabbi Yehuda Fataya. So they brought him to Rabbi Yehuda Fataya, and he came. When the rabbi came to the house, the rabbi actually came to him. The rabbi came to the house. He was lying in his bed, and only the whites of his eyes were showing. That's always a wonderful sign to enter. You're going with only the whites. There was no pupil, no nothing. And the rabbi started speaking to the spirit, and it turns out that this spirit was a donkey driver, and he used to transport merchandise. And one time, because again he was saying that the sins that he did in his life. One time he was going with an entourage of people, and they were traveling to a certain destination, and he was taking a passenger. It was a married woman who wanted to go pray by the grave of a certain righteous prophet. And as they were traveling with this whole group, he slowly lingered behind until he says, "Oh, I know a detour." He took a little detour off the road, and he brought her into a place where no one can hear her scream, and he then committed an immoral act against her will. And then he threatened her. He says, "If you go and if you scream anything, I'm going to kill you." And later, this woman, she was a righteous, honorable woman, and she renounced her husband, and her husband went and divorced her from that. After that was one of his sins. Another sin is that he was in the desert, and he had a mule, and he did a similar act to Bilam did with his mule. Bilam and his mule were husband and wife, so he similarly acted to his mule with his in the same fashion. And a short while after that, he also had relations with a male. So, needless to say, this guy wasn't a righteous man. And a few short years after that, he got into some fight with some Muslim other donkey drivers, and they ganged up on him and they killed him. And he was buried in this unmarked grave. Later, his brother came to retrieve his items because he used to transport a lot of stuff. And he says the brother not only didn't do anything, he didn't even return those items to the rightful owners. He took everything for himself. He took the money for himself, and he didn't even say kaddish for this brother. Which reminds me, I had the case once that there was a certain person that his father passed away, and I didn't deal with it personally, but I heard this from the person that was dealing with, that the father passed away, was not religious, and the mother to the son told him, "I do not want you to say kaddish on your father." And that got me so upset. I'm like, why? Because you don't believe in God? Everybody believes something. So you believe 5%, you believe 1%, you believe 0.5%. There's something you cannot know for certain that God does not exist. We're going to do a whole series on believing and proving God. We're going to do B'ezrat Hashem that. It's going to be unbelievable. It's going to be huge. All right. So it's really B'ezrat Hashem. So, but it's really going to be such an important class whatever. We'll speak about it afterwards. The person, and it really bothered me. I'm like, so let's say, why would you refuse to allow, do you not love your husband? Do you not want him to at least get some sort of nechama in the next world? Why would you say, no, I'm not going to say any kaddish? It really is something that bothers me. It really bothers me so much. Why would you just say no, that it doesn't, just say no? It just makes zero sense to me. But in any case, this particular person, he said that his brother didn't say any kaddish on him, and it bothered him so much what he did that he ended up haunting his brother until the point in time that his brother became very sick, and he died a very, very terrible death. He made him lose all his money and everything that he had. So the spirit goes on. He says it's been 17 years since he was murdered, and the rabbi asked him, "Did you do any teshuvah before you passed away?" So he says, everything was so crazy that I was too terrified to even think about teshuvah. And he says, but his entire life, he only put on tefillin and talit only 3 times. And he also only prayed on Yom Kippur. That's it when he prayed. I know some people like this, it's very unfortunate. And so he says, and he goes on further and he says, this is not the first time that I'm in this world. He says he knew all his previous incarnations as well. His the first time that he came to this world, he was in Tzfat, and his name was Solomon, the son of Ezekiel. And he sinned excessively in that lifetime. And then it was decreed that he'd be reincarnated in levels. First he had to be, and I spoke about this in reincarnation class, he first had to be reincarnated at a mineral level, then it goes up to a vegetable level, and then it goes into animal level, and then it goes back to a human. He says, but what happened was very interesting, that he was in a pomegranate, and there was a righteous man, a righteous tzaddik by the name of Shimon, that he went, and during Shabbat meal, he made a shechianu on the fruit that he was, incarnated in. And because of that, he was able to, he was get some sort of rectification. on it. And that's why Yehuda Fataya says it's very possible why it says that afterwards he was brought down into a human. He skipped that whole animal stage, because when you make the blessing, you're able to go and push the tikkun one level higher. So he goes after that. He was incarnated in a man who, for some reason, he puts in this information, I'm not sure what, that he thought that it was very healthy to eat fat. And he just ate tons of fat, and he died, by one point. So the third time that he was in this incarnation, it was in this time that he was recently. And he says not only did he not correct anything, but he brought more sin upon more sin upon more sin to him. And he said it's been 450 years since the first time that he came into this world. So he says, and he goes on, he says it's been, after his demise, 35 destroying angels came to him, and they would beat him 15 hours a day. After the remaining 9 hours, there would be this desert that he would go into, and with snakes and scorpions, in which they would bite into his flesh and eat it until he died, and then he would be revived again. So he goes on, and we're finishing in like 3-4 minutes. He goes on and he says that, see, the air conditioning is also happy. He goes on and he says that the reason why he possessed this particular spirit is because one day this man was walking on Shabbat and he picked the fruit off the tree. And he says for that reason, there was also another reason. And the other reason was that he didn't act with a woman, not a married woman, doesn't say married, he didn't act with a woman. It wasn't relations, but it was something in that vicinity. He did a certain act with a woman. And because of that, a sexual act. And because of that, but not relations. And because of that, the spirit was able to possess him. As the spirit was talking, there was the mother was bringing in food for the people in the room, and the spirit says, you don't see this? He says, in that piece of meat, in that roast meat, there's an 87-year-old woman that had to be reincarnated again, because of the fact that she wasn't modest in her lifetime. She did an act of immodesty. And then he goes over and he says, there is another girl that's in that piece of pomegranate. And then on the bird over there is another reincarnation of another person. And the spirit says what you have to do is when you make a bracha, you have to say it with intent and kavanah, and that rectifies everybody over in that area. So, long story short, the rabbi, came to a certain point in time that he was able to get the spirit to leave this boy. And it's late. So to make a long story short, he was able to leave, and that was the end of that story. It was very interesting because what actually happened in the Ilah on Yom Kippur, that it was sitting on Yom Kippur, and the spirit, they saw like something was happening. And what happens when you see someone fall on the floor and something's happening? Everybody gathers around to watch it, and the spirit started saying, everybody leave, and that just made more people come. And then the spirit says, if you don't leave, I'm going to start revealing all your sins. And then people left. And then what happened was, and then the boy was, the spirit was living through his leg. It was causing, he was, hitting his leg on the floor with tremendous force as it was going on. The spirit then said to the Baal Tukah, to the guy who blows the shofar, it says, blow the shofar and have concentration on me when you blow it. And then from there, the spirit left him, and that was the end of that story. And the boy healed completely by the next. That day, he had to be carried home because of the pain of his foot. By the next day, he was completely healed. We want to give a quick, a summary that this is, the purpose of this series is very, very important. Not for the fact. I know there are going to be many people that are going to be like, "What? Come on! This is not true. How you can? There's a spirit that came in, and the rabbi spoke to them." This is what I deal with on a daily basis. So, to make something very, very clear. If I were to tell you these stories from anything else, then yes, I would not believe myself in it. Every story that I bring down here is brought down from legit sources that you can know. An example: imagine Chacham Avadia Yosef would tell you a story. Would you believe it? Yes, nobody would doubt in it. Even the secular people would say, okay, it's true. The rabbi who said these stories was a giant of the generation. His name was Rabbi Yehuda Fataya. Look him up. He brings down these stories so you know that these stories are verified for a purpose, and he brought them down for a purpose as well. And one purpose that I learned from this is look at how much we have to be careful when we're living in life in this world. We have the ability now to change. Afterwards, it's game over. You can't be like, oh, wait, I wish I could have done this. I wish I could have done that. I wish I could have made myself better. We'll get questions in a second. Yeah, I wish I could have done. Now you have the ability to fulfill those wishes that you will have in the future, after 120. So it is very, very imperative to go and look at each and every single one of us to see what we have to fix, what we have to do, what we have to change to make sure that when the time comes, we don't have to deal, God forbid, with any of these, but rather we could go straight to Gan Eden, or even better yet, Mashiach will come, we'll go straight to Olam Haba, b'mheira b'yameinu. Any questions? Yes?
My question is like, does this stuff, I believe all the stories, but does this stuff still happen?
So that's a question I actually get so very, very rare. Most likely not. Very, very rare. Can I say no? Yeah, it doesn't seem like it. It's very, very rare this happens
And
now.
also it's just like,
By the way, these stories are from like 100 years ago. It's not like from 2,000 years ago.
but like you mentioned that there was a person in a seed, a person in a tree, a person in a chicken.
That still happens.
Yeah, but I'm saying, as much as I know, everyone's done some sort of sin. Like, wouldn't everybody just end up reincarnated?
No, not necessarily. Depending on the sin, and only God knows this. We can't. I spoke about. Did I speak about? Yeah, I did. I spoke about in the reincarnation class. I think it was a third one about what sins you have to be reincarnated for what issue. So let's say somebody did, had relations with a non-Jew who comes back as a dog. There's different aspects of different things.
That's literal?
Yes, yeah, the Arizal brings it down. That brings down Pi Kabbalah. Now, unless they didn't do teshuvah. Now, it doesn't give a list of all the sins. You can't Google search okay, for sin this, you're going to be brought down in a pomegranate in the California region. What? You also, there's a lot of aspects, and who are we to know? It's only God that knows the full picture. But it still happens. That's why when you make brachot, that's why brachot are so important. Forget about all the kavanot and this and around in that level, but to make a simple bracha and concentrate on the words that you say. What blessing do I make on water, Rabbi? Know your brachot. It's not so complicated. There's an app called Brachos, I think it is, a Brachos app that you just, like Twizzlers. What do I make on Twizzlers? Like, who knows? You look, what?
Isn't that a machlokas?
Look at the app. The app doesn't bring down the machlokas.
If you don't say the blessing in Hebrew, does it make a tikkun whatsoever?
That's a good question. You should say it in Hebrew. And I believe there is an app that even will tell it to you in English. What is it called? Transliteration?
Yeah.
So you should, so it'll just tell you like that. It's very important to have it. These things, because imagine you could have, unfortunately, things that are suffering. These are souls that are suffering, that if you make a blessing, you're giving them a tikkun. It's such a, like you could do so much, and we don't know. We don't see these things. It's beyond our lives. We're delving really much into the spiritual world, and I've gotten this before. Like, oh, come on. I recently spoke to a man, regarding this. Like, oh, why does God do that? I can't understand. Like, so much suffering, so much terrible things, all for what? For certain sins that doesn't make any sense. Because if you think about it, the first story that we said, it was a guy who sinned once, 15 years, he's still suffering for that one sin. Which shows you'd be like, oh, the punishment doesn't match the crime, and actually it does if you think about it. First of all, this man slept with a married woman. People don't. If you have to understand the level of the caliber of that sin, that is one of the worst sins possible. Right. It's not like
people nowadays,
not everybody.
Everybody's gonna get that. Like, I don't mean everyone, but I just mean so many people.
So many people commit adultery? Hang around new people.
It's so normal in this generation that...
Adultery is normal in this generation?
Come on.
It happens all the time. Even like when you're...
All the time.
So
we hear more about it, but like...
So I hear about these things a lot more than general people.
And it's on TV, it's like...
Oh, non-Jews. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about the TV world. So in the Jewish world, it's unfortunately it happens, but it's not as common. I hear these cases. I hear them. It does happen more than it is. Of course, it's on the, and rightfully so. It should be on the down low, but not that it's common and normal. It's definitely not normal. It's definitely out of the ordinary. If you would say a percentage-wise, I wouldn't say 50% of couples have the adultery. It's
like maybe here the Jews keep it on the down low. Over there they don't.
I'll tell you how these things work. When bad things, if they don't do repentance,
they don't know about it. They don't know nothing.
That's also like, how do they get married? There's a lot of things to speak about it.
What's the deal with like married men? We always hear about the women and.
Very good question. Very good question. So, question that I did not want to answer.
That's why they were asked. Let's back it up. Why is adultery for a woman considered? It's worse. It's for sure worse than a man. Now why? Why is it? So,
to understand that aspect, we have to understand a very simple aspect of, back in the day, why would it be that a man would be allowed to have multiple wives, but a woman would not be allowed to have multiple husbands? And the answer for that is a very simple answer, which is, if a man has multiple wives, we know exactly who the father and who the mother is if they have a child. If a woman has multiple husbands, we don't know who is the father of that child. No one, and that comes into very big problems. You don't know if he's a Kohen, Levi, Israel. We don't know who his half siblings are. We don't know who his siblings are, which means is, who is he able to get married to? Who is he not able to get married to? It comes and brings up a tremendous amount of problems and issues. And this is why also the a mamzel is specifically with in that particular case, and not in vice versa. Not to say that a man who cheats on his wife is like, okay, I'm good. He's done a very, very serious sin, but it's in a different aspect of things for many reasons, that being one of them. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you do teshuvah, but a lot of times the sins that we do teshuvah on, you end up doing them again. So does it
count? Yes. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't. If you're like, God, I'm so sorry that I wasn't dressing modestly. Oh, I'm going to buy this beautiful dress. It's going to be so short, but it's okay. It depends. If you're doing teshuvah and the
moment you're serious,
then that's a real teshuvah. Yeah, that's a real teshuvah. You should still do teshuvah. Don't think of it like, oh, I'm such a hypocrite. I know I'm going to just do it again. Right now, you're sincere. Do the teshuvah. The teshuvah is there's partial credit, if I can say it like that.
You can't say I'm never going to do it again, because then you might be
that's
lying.
What I'm saying. Isn't part of teshuvah, I'm never going to do it again?
Then you're lying, and then you got to do teshuvah for that.
Do it again.
First of all, if something really bothers you, so put it this way. Let's say someone accidentally murders somebody, and no, I'm saying I'm giving a what? No, I'm not talking about. I'm talking about nowadays, and they want to do teshuvah on that. I'll be like, well, I'm never going to do it again, but, how could I really know? I'm like, you could say, like, okay, I know with my heart that I really don't want to do this again. If you are doing sincere teshuvah, then you can say, I'm really trying not to do this again. God forbid if it does happen, then don't worry about you lying. That's the last thing on your list that you should do.
Murder, but I'm talking about something simple that we all do.
So you should still do teshuvah, still say that I'm going to try never to do this thing again.
We don't know if we're going to make it till tomorrow, We hear about all these tragedies, God forbid, I'm sorry to take it back to the depressing moon.
Yeah. No, but it's true.
We don't know if we're going to be here tomorrow.
Of course it counts, yeah. Of course it counts. You're 100% right, and yes, it does count. It does count. You should do teshuvah even though you're going to sin. And this is how the Satan gets you. The Satan gets you to be like, oh, really? Really? You're going to do teshuvah? Think God wants to talk to you? It'll be like, like after all the sins that you did. And if you realize it, you're just talking to yourself. And then you'll be like, whoa, why am I talking to
That's how it works. You do a sin, you say, I'm sorry, and you're done.
You have to do the teshuvah process. There are tikkunim, and there are that. If we're not delving into Kabbalah, if we're not delving into that, yes, you do those three sins. The Rambam in Hilchot Teshuvah speaks out and brings down that certain sins you have to go through suffering. Like a karet. Let's say you didn't keep Shabbat, and now you have to start keeping Shabbat. You're still have to.
If you accidentally break Shabbat, if you accidentally eat dairy right after meat.
That's a shogeg. So you do teshuvah, yeah. You do teshuvah, and you're done with it. Yeah. You want the best that you could always do is put something upon yourself. Be like, you know what? To make sure that I don't do this. Let's say you accidentally broke Shabbat. So to make sure that I don't do this, I'm going to start learning all the laws of Shabbat, because it's a very complex, and most people don't know the laws of Shabbat. It's very, very imperative. Now this is also, people don't realize they are doing teshuvah with only themselves. You also have to do teshuvah if, let's say, you help somebody else do a sin. If you're like, okay, come on, you bring somebody else down with you. Very, very common, unfortunately, that people forget about this. You go and, I always use this example, as I find this a very easy example to understand, and it's really more of a man-oriented example. You get someone involved in gambling, and they become a compulsive gambler, and they lose everything, and they lose their wife, and they end up going off the derech, and they end up losing everything. It's your fault. You got to, try to make some sort of amends. Now, granted, you're not going to might not be able to change him, but it's something that you should, this has been adam lechavero. This is also something. Teshuvah is not only between you and God. If you hurt somebody else, you have to ask for forgiveness for that person. You could do teshuvah from today until tomorrow. Let's say you embarrass somebody in public, and they became very red, they became very embarrassed. you could fast 1,000 times and you could give all your money to charity. If you didn't appease that other person, you still have something that you have to deal with. So it's something that you have to, every aspect has, has to come on its and this is, by the way, this is also very true on married couples. Married couples, I don't think we have only, 2 married couples over here. So B'ezrat Hashem soon. So, but when you help your husband or vice versa, the husband helps wife go down or go up, that also has on your effect. What you did if you made him sin, or he made you sin. This is something you have to think of it as a big picture. There's not just something that's you and just your little world. Everything comes into play in a much larger picture. It's very unfortunate that some married couples, they instead of helping each other raise to higher spirituality, they bring each other down, and both of them, they both pull each other one after another. You have a question? Yeah.
If let's say let's say I have a group of friends and we all do the same thing. For example, like we watch movies, right? And I invite all my friends to watch a movie. Does that count as like making them sin? Because if watching a movie is considered a sin. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, they're going to watch one anyway. I just gave the offer to. So let me. Or putting on a non-Jewish song in front of your friends who listen to non-Jewish music.
Right. So let me rephrase that question, and we're going to go in a much worse way. Drug dealer gets busted, right? I think you can see where I'm going with this. And he says, "Well, that's what I said. I said it's not the same, but it's the same concept." And he says, and they say, like you sold drugs to children, and one of them overdosed and died. And the drug dealer would be like, "Listen, yes, you're right. I did do that. I'm terribly sorry, but." They would have done it anyway. Like if it wasn't me, they would have been something to somebody else, and they would have got something to somebody, to somebody else. Is that my fault? Let me rephrase it like this also. Let's say, for example, they're arranging a Torah class, and one girl or one person or one man decides that he's going to take it and he's going to arrange it. It was going to happen anyways. It was going to happen. This guy was just smarter, or this girl was smarter, and they took responsibility. They'd be like, you know what? I'm going to do everything. I'm going to be involved with everything over here. And at the end, it did happen. Who does it get all reward to? The people that that worked very hard to arrange this. I'm pointing at you for you didn't hear what I was talking about, but that was okay. So
I have to ask them for forgiveness. I just did teshuvah for them.
You ask them for forgiveness, and there's nothing. Yeah, so you do teshuvah, and invite them over, tell them you watch a movie, and then you put on TorahAnytime.com. Why? Those can get really good. Just trust me, and then they'll never call you again. Bring them to this class.
I did.
Oh, very good.
I have a question about the story you were saying. The last story with the boy with the foot that was there.
By the way, I know we're ready. I'm sorry, we're going to say we're already overdue. If anybody needs to leave or whatever it is, feel free. You want to relax on these beautiful couches that we have over here, do whatever, books. So we have, it's a really beautiful place.
So that story,
let me just, while we are saying over here, we just have to thank BJX for hosting us over here, and B'ezrat Hashem for whoever wants to join. We will be here on every Thursday, B'ezrat Hashem at 8 o'clock. To tune in for more information, or email me, and then I could tell you more information. Yes, your question.
So the last story, the boy. What sin did he do? I think I missed it. He
did 3 sins. So one of them, he committed adultery.
Not the spirit, the boy himself. Did he the spirit went in him?
One of them is he picked the fruit on Shabbat, and another one he did a certain sin with a woman.
The boy himself, the spirit got into. Okay, I missed that.
Yeah.
Then can I ask more?
Yeah, please.
What did the spirit do that it deserved out of all the spirits in the world that did such things? He had the merit to come back into this.
Which means and the rabbi was able to effect the unification. Yeah. That's a merit. What did he do? I don't know. That is a merit. That is a merit.
He did something in his
must have been, yeah. Everything is measure for measure in the next world.
It's not like we just flew by and
They'll be like, there's nothing is coincidence. Nothing is ever coincidence in life. Everything is for a reason and a purpose. Nothing is coincidental. So yeah, there's a reason. Why? I don't know. What was the reason? Doesn't bring down.
Okay.
Yeah, while you're thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, go on.
How come there's not really possessions anymore?
So one reason, why I can't really tell you. I don't know. I don't know. But we do know that the rabbis that we had, in the previous years that knew how to do these things, don't, if they exist now, I don't know any of them, but maybe there are, maybe there aren't. I know there are stories that come out, and there's different things that go in the news in the past few years, but definitely not in the caliber that we had. So it's very possible God sends first the refuah, first the healing before the problem. So being that we don't have the ability, or we don't have the ability like we used to exercise them, what's the purpose? There's no, it's not going to be able to come into effect. And that's just my personal answer. There might be many more, but that's just one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Time in the next world, in this world, you were saying, I must have missed that too. You were saying something about it was 40 years. 40 years time that he, whatever, 40 years time.
What does that time frame mean and things like that?
Yeah.
So it's the distance of time that it has to take from.
Here was one sentence.
Right.
So they feel the pain.
Right.
Should I hurry up?
No. I'm just saying I'll answer some questions off camera.
Okay.
I just yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
What are the unifications? Prayer for the soul?
Yeah, it's a lot has to do with Tehillim, with Yosef Beseter Elyon. There's a certain Tehillim and how you say it that you say it forward and back. Or there's different methods, the Kabbalistic methods, and what you're supposed to say. These tikkunim. There's also shofar involved.
Rather than not doing the shul for the person who's praying for his sake.
It's sort of doing. So that's why it's called like it's like unification. So it's not like you're not doing teshuvah in it. It causes tremendous suffering and pain to the spirit, but it cleanses him. Think of it. It's like I don't know, sort of way of dry cleaning. But it's not like he can't do teshuvah for somebody else. You can't do teshuvah for somebody else. So it's not considered teshuvah. It's a tikkun.
Right.
Thanks for coming, guys. Next week we're all same time, same place. Yeah.
What about for the another that we did, but we don't remember?
That's a very big, So that's there's nothing. What are you supposed to do? That's why Yom Kippur we go through it. Yeah. Yom Kippur we go through those.
They don't just on Yom Kippur. They don't just like.
Well, that's why. What you could do, and it's very good, is before your prayers on Yom Kippur, when you look through over the prayers, maybe what could I possibly? It goes through categories, and so it covers almost everything. So you go over there, and be like, what possibly I could have done in this category, and you can write it down. Maybe I did this. It's sort of like it gives you a reminder to do it. That's why you're supposed to do teshuvah right away. You don't push it off. But yeah, it's unfortunate. Any other questions?
Why does it help with the person that's true right before they die?
Why does it help?
Yeah, you're not going to do it again anyway, so you're promising.
Right. So to what caliber does it help? Also, we know. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Terach, Avraham.